The worst thing you could possibly do in the beginning stages of dating, or even if you are deep in a relationship, is ignore a red flag and let a deal breaker slide. This is literally how you end up in toxic, abusive, unhealthy, unsatisfying relationships. It's because you overlooked the red flags and you let the deal breakers slide. Why? Maybe you were afraid of being alone. Maybe you just really love this person and you're super in deep and attached already. But the sooner you catch the red flags and question them, get to the bottom of them and figure out why they're there and what they are, and if they are actually a deal breaker or not, the better. Because if it actually is a deal breaker and you choose to allow it to continue and you stay for that, that is your choice, and that is you choosing to self-abandon for a relationship with a person that isn't truly benefiting you in a positive way. In fact, if anything, it is creating negativity in your life and bringing you down because you're allowing your boundaries to be broken, disrespect to happen, all for what? Because you don't want to be alone? Because you think this is your person? Well, I hate to tell you, but they're not your person. Your person would treat you with respect and kindness, and they wouldn't want to hurt you. Even if they do care about you and they're doing all this anyway, well, they're unhealed. And why would you want to be with a person who doesn't value growth and want to work on themselves when you do? Because you're watching this video, you want that for yourself. Hi, I'm Julia. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. This video is all about why you should never ignore red flags and deal breakers while dating and in relationships. Coming from somebody who has been in 2 long-term relationships that honestly I would say were not very successful, and I don't consider them unsuccessful because they didn't work out, because I think you can have a very successful relationship that doesn't work out. I consider them unsuccessful because I ignored many red flags. I allowed a lot of deal breakers to slide, and I continued to stay angry at myself for allowing myself to stay in relationships that weren't nourishing or fulfilling or healing, and were the opposite. Staying in relationships that were continuously bringing me down, were draining and negative and creating more wounds. That's why I consider them unsuccessful. But the positive takeaway from it was that I learned a lot about myself, about other people, about relationship dynamics, about what I want for my next relationship. And to me, I find that to be successful. So although the relationships themselves were not great, I was able to come out a better, stronger, more self-aware, confident, worthy, feeling human being. Because I actually got to realize a lot of things and then start my inner work and healing journey to become the woman I want to be to attract a healthy, happy, successful relationship. So the point that I'm trying to get at is, if you have a non-negotiables list, which I talked about in my previous video, so click the I to watch that, you can then weed out the people that are not right for you by using that non-negotiables list as a roadmap to the correct person. But there could be somebody who fits your non-negotiables list almost quite to a T, but they exhibit a few red flags, shall we say, which may end up leading to a deal breaker. Now, if they fit your non-negotiables list fully and completely, they most likely won't end up on your deal breakers list, but you never know. There could be something you miss and it could slide, and you could find that there is a deal breaker in there somewhere. It's really important to be very aware of the red flags and take them into account as early on as possible so you can figure out if they are a deal breaker before you get in too deep. Now, you know, things happen in life and not every relationship is meant to be, and people do grow apart and change, and what could have fit your non-negotiables list and been completely clear of red flags and deal breakers could eventually fall into red flag and deal breaker territory in the future. But that is a risk we take. There's always a risk in trying to achieve any desire that you have, so there's no like foolproof plan. But by paying attention to red flags and deal breakers and figuring out major ones for yourself, you're definitely putting yourself a step up from the general population who goes solely based off of emotion and attraction when choosing a partner, which, yeah, we definitely want to feel feelings for the person that we're with and be attracted to them, but that is not the only thing we need to have a nourishing, fulfilling, successful, happy relationship. There's a lot of other stuff that people really don't take into account, and it's so important, equally as important as being attracted to the person you're with, is having a good, solid foundation. And that's what you figure out when you have non-negotiables. But you can't have that foundation if you got a crap ton of red flags and deal breakers in there as well. That being said, what a red flag is to me is it's an indicator of, oh my gosh, I don't know how I feel about that. That thing makes me feel a little weird. That thing makes me feel a little anxious. I'm checking it off with a red flag to evaluate and assess and ask questions about, do research on, and get to the bottom of what this is, because potentially this red flag could lead to a deal breaker. Or I find out that it's just miscommunication or misunderstanding, and it's actually not that big of a deal. A red flag can go either way, but it's a warning. It's a sign of, let me look into this. So I'm gonna give you guys a few examples of my personal red flags, but I do wanna make this a little interactive just for fun. Comment down below your personal red flags. As many as you want. We can relate in the comments, and maybe I can add them to my list, and maybe you can add mine to your list. An example of a red flag for me is somebody who tries to make last minute plans. Maybe they just really want to see you and they weren't really thinking it through, but they typically make plans in advance of you. Okay, that's a little bit of a red flag. Let's see, like maybe they just were thinking of you and wanted to see you and were around, and that's why, but next time they're going to obviously like make the plans in advance. It could be like that type of thing, or it could be because they aren't that serious about you and maybe they just want to hook up, and maybe they don't care about your time or your whatever. So last minute plans is definitely a great example of a red flag. Another red flag I like to look for is with communication. If they're super short over text and they're like, hey, WYD or WYA, or that always rings as a red flag to me. It's like, well, why couldn't you type it out? Like, you could be a little bit more proper. You really don't know me that well, so why are you speaking to me like that? And even if you did know me really well, like, I don't know if I like that. Maybe they're just busy at work and they're thinking of you and they just want to send a quick text off, like, okay. But if they're just not putting in the effort, that is a definite red flag and a deal breaker. They just don't want to put in effort to speak to you. Another one could be if they're super delayed over text, like, okay, maybe they're at work. That's understandable. We like provider men who work hard at work, but if they're always super delayed and you just get a weird vibe, maybe they're just not really thinking of you and they're not that serious, and they maybe are talking to somebody else, who knows, but let's put that as a deal breaker, because you don't want to be barking up the wrong tree. You want somebody who is really super interested in you and wants to actually devote time and energy into talking to you and getting to know you and making plans with you, and isn't 1 minute here, 1 minute there. I think an example of a red flag is if you have to ask them more than once to do something, yeah, maybe they forgot. Okay, well, that's not great, but people do get busy, things happen, we can be a little forgiving. But if it's a reoccurring theme of them forgetting and you have to ask about something, deal breaker. They don't care enough. You're not a priority. Here's a funny little anecdotal story time on red flags. So after my initial breakup, I dated like a handful of guys, and almost all of them except for 2 went by their middle name or some type of nickname, which I don't know why that happened. It was kind of weird, but all of them would be super open about it. They would like eventually, or even on the first date, tell me like, oh, I go by my middle name, and then they were like, I'd ask to see their ID. It would be like a whole thing. It'd be funny and like no big deal, except for this one guy who was so weird about it. And I had my suspicions on him because I like to do my due diligence and really like check a person before meeting them. Like, I literally run their number through a background checker. I think it's called Checkmate. You can download the app. I think it does cost money though. I haven't used it in a while, but when I checked his number, his name came up as a different name than what it was on the app I met him on, because I was meeting all these guys except for one off of the dating apps. And I was like, that's weird. His name is this on the app, but it's coming up as a different number. And I was like, maybe it's his dad's name. I don't know. Maybe his phone is under his dad or something. No, but I checked it off as a red flag and not a deal breaker just yet, because I needed more information. So we go on a date and I ask him what his last name is, and he tells me what it is, and I'm like, okay, but I still have my suspicions. Like, there was just something off. Like, my literal intuition, like my gut was telling me. So So we go on one more date, and when he goes to put his phone in the aux, it shows up as the name that I saw when I looked up his phone number, that name's phone. And I ask him, I'm like, who is the name? And he gets weird and kind of like deflects my question, and I'm like, oh, that's weird, and my like ding 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 red flag is like going off like hard. I'm like, can I see your ID? And he's like, no, never had that happen before. Any guy who I've asked to see their ID, they're like, yeah, here's my ID. And I'm always looking at them to see if they're lying about like their name, their height, or whatever. I do that a lot now. That's like my little trick. I'm like, here's my ID, can I see yours? If you ever go to like a bar with somebody, they have to pull it out anyway, so it's like the perfect time to check to see if they are who they say they are. I've never had anyone be weird about showing their ID except for this guy, and I'm like, okay, he's lying. He's absolutely lying about something. Whether it's his first name, his last name, whatever his name is, he's lying. And then I just go silent because I'm like, I know he's lying, and that's a deal breaker, so I just want this date to be over. And so I'm silent, and he finally switches the subject. And so I still have to be on this date, I guess. I mean, I could have left. I could have been like, please drop me off. But I guess I was still trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, even though I kind of knew. And I felt weird. I should have told him to drop me off, but whatever. So we continue on the date. Finally, we're like talking. I don't know what comes up, but he like asked me something. And the topic of trust comes into play. And I'm like, hey, if you want me to trust you, then you have to be honest with me. I know your name is not what you say it is. So who is the name that I saw on your phone, and what is your real name? And he's like, you're right. And he admits that the name that he had in his profile that he wanted me to call him was his middle name, and that the name that I saw on his phone was his first name. But for me, it was already a deal breaker. He already lied. And also, side note, his Instagram had the nickname of his first name, and I didn't really know what it was, but I was like, this man has like a bunch of names. But if you're lying about your names to me, but yet have your first name's nickname public on your IG, like what type of game are you running on me, sir? So that was a complete deal breaker, because why are you okay with the general public knowing your first name, but then this girl that you apparently want to date, you want her to call you by your middle name? Like, I don't know. He was suspicious AF, and I was not going to stick around to see the rest of it. So, fun story time. That is a great example of a red flag leading to a deal breaker. Now, let me give you some great examples of deal breakers that I have. A person who can't be held accountable for their actions. Somebody who can't take accountability, they're going to gaslight you, try to make you feel bad for something they did. Like, no, that is full-blown deal breaker territory, and honestly, that's emotional abuse. Somebody who is super inconsistent with communication, that means I'm not a priority. I don't jam with that. Any type of verbal abuse. Any type. Doesn't matter what it is. If they're calling me mean names, yelling at me, no. It shouldn't even get to that point. I should catch some red flags before it even gets there. But that is a full-blown deal breaker. Obviously, there's a million that I could say for both red flags and deal breakers, but last example I want to leave you with is a guy that goes 50-50 on dates. Now, I know that isn't a deal breaker for everyone, but it is for me, because it just shows how much this person does not see you as a prize and wants to impress you. Even if you're not necessarily looking for a provider type of guy, like, why would you want a guy who isn't trying to impress you and win you over? It's a complete deal breaker for me in general, because not only do I want a guy to try to impress me and win me over, I also want a provider man. So a provider man would never ever go 50-50 on any dates, period, the end. He would want to provide for me as much as he possibly can until he is with me and can provide everything. That would just be a full-blown deal breaker for me. So if I were to go ahead and keep seeing a guy who wanted to go 50-50 on a date with me, that would be me self-abandoning in a sense, because I'm going against a value that I have and a boundary for a guy who doesn't have that same value, so the relationship would never work anyway. So if you do go ahead and date somebody who doesn't meet your standards and your non-negotiables, because the non-negotiable of mine clearly is a provider, then you're literally setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for a relationship that's not going to work out. And I've actually actually done that. I remember literally going on a date with one of my ex-boyfriends, and he had me use my card to get the food, and he said send me a Venmo of whatever it is. I was like, okay, that's fine. So I sent him a Venmo of the food the entire meal, because up until that point he had paid for all of our dates. This guy had the audacity to cancel my Venmo request and send me half of the request that I sent him, and he wrote lunch split. I remember being so upset about that and literally crying and being like, it's never gonna work. He's a 50-50 guy. And what did I do? I went on to date him for 2.5 years. And how was he the entire relationship? Besides the fact that he was emotionally abusive, he was full-blown 50-50 and wanted me to pay for sometimes more. So that was my bad. I literally saw the red flags, the deal breakers, and said, no, I like him so much. I'm gonna go ahead and date him anyway. Am I crazy? Yes, I was crazy at the time, but you know what? I learned. And will I ever do that again? Nope, never. I learned my lesson the hard way. Please take my advice and learn this lesson the easy way from my mistakes so you don't have to go through that. And if you are going through that right now, please take the trash out. I will see you in my next video. I love you guys so much. Bye!